look at what they benchmarked against. What's up, YouTube? Welcome to Fred's Full Throttle. Each week I'm going to take you with me on my adventures in the world of cars. So let's get right into today's video. Alright, so for today's video I want to talk a little bit about Chevy's message of the C8 Z06 putting the world on notice, what that means for the supercar industry, and why this is probably going to be a bit of a watershed moment for supercars as a whole. So let's get right into it. Alright, so right out of the gate, Chevy knows what's riding on this. They're not a bunch of idiots. They understand how significant the C8 Z06 is going to be and why this is going to be such a big deal for the supercar world as a whole, as well as performance driving and anybody who's a car enthusiast. So if you're watching this, you probably already know that at the end of the C6 generation, there was the ZR1. With C7, both the Z06 and the ZR1, there were some very, very high performance versions of the Corvette as a whole, and those skirted the lines of what a supercar actually is. Chevy's been playing with this a little bit, and obviously with the C8 coming out, it was right under that cusp of where everybody can agree that it's a supercar. And it's that unclear status of, is it a supercar, is it not a supercar, that really has bought European supercar makers a little bit of time. Sort of a shot across the bow, if you will, of what was coming with the C8 Z06. But make no mistake, Chevy knows that with the introduction of the C8 Z06, they're now on everybody's radar. And that's part of why their message of putting the world on notice, why they've chosen that messaging, and why it's important for the car as a whole, as well as what it means for the industry. With the whole world watching, Chevy knows that supercar makers and exotic makers are waiting for Chevy to blink, waiting for them to flub this whole launch, waiting for them to somehow fail to deliver on the promises that they're making. And for their part, Chevy is not only aware of this, but they're not going to let that happen. Now, getting this launch right is really important to Chevy. The one aspect they don't really have a ton of control over is independent dealerships. Dealerships have the ability to mark up the cars. They don't have to sell them for MSRP. You can then have people buying the cars and flipping them for a much greater profit. So there are some variables here, but by and large, Chevy is going to control the manufacturing experience, and mark my words, they're going to make as many of these cars as they are able to, capitalizing on the interest in the car. So we're going to get right into that. Chevy wants to buck the exclusive availability of Porsche, the snooty elitism of Ferrari, and give you the performance of a Lamborghini, all while actually letting you get a car that you can pretty much get serviced at any Chevy dealership and be able to drive it as a daily driver if you wanted to. So my first point is that Chevy knows what an opportunity this is. If you look at supercar makers, exotic makers, over the last, I don't know, 5 to 6 years, you've noticed a trend. A lot of them are moving away from naturally aspirated motors. They're going to hybridization. But that's also been a bit of a problem for these companies. A lot of these companies are making cars that no longer sound like the cars that people are used to. They may offer a fantastic performance, but they are not the true to the soul of some of those brands. And I totally get it. And trust me, I'm a fan of a lot of these makers, and I understand that that's the direction they have to go. Chevy understands this, and there's a couple reasons that I say that. The biggest thing is that Chevy is embracing a unique engine, and they're taking a car and making it have the soul and character that supercars of old, 10, 20 years ago, were all known for. Think of any of the greats. Think of an F40, think of an EB110, think of Lamborghini Countach, Diablo. There are a lot of great cars out there, and all of them were known for having just an amazing motor, a motor that gave a car character, a motor that gave the car a fantastic sound, and that just from a distance you could hear the car coming along and know this is something special. That's what the Z06 is. It's skipping the hybridization for now, and it's going to be a car that really celebrates the character that you get with a naturally aspirated motor. There's no superchargers, there's no turbos, and that's something that is exceedingly rare these days among supercars. One of the ways you know that Chevy is really aware of this, understands the status of the car, as well as what they're putting behind the engineering in the car, is take a look at what they benchmarked against. There's a bunch of photos online of the cars they were testing with as they were going through development. Two of the cars that stood out to me are a Ferrari 458 Italia, widely regarded as one of the best Ferraris, best looking, best sounding, as well as having one of the best motors, as well as a Porsche 911 GT2. That's one of, if not, the fastest production 911 ever made. Most powerful, highest performance, best numbers on a track, and the fact that they're benchmarking the car against these gives you a couple of clues as to what Chevy's intending. They want the style, they want the character, they want that raucous noise that a flat plane motor brings. And that's what that 458 brings to the comparison. And then the GT2, I mean, it needs no introduction. It's a $300,000+ car. It's unbelievably fast on the racetrack, and it's there for one thing: to put down really, really good lap times. Taking those two things and putting them together and getting them into one car in a cohesive manner, under a warranty, I mean, all of those things speak to the targets that they're setting for this car and to the bar that they want to hit. So I think that's a really good indicator as to the level of performance, the level of prestige, and the level of outright character that this car is going to have. And knowing that about their development, the time spent, the money spent, the targets that they're shooting for, this car really needs to achieve all of the things that they were setting out to do and make it attainable. That's how Chevy is differentiating themselves in the equation. They're making a car that offers all of those things I just mentioned, but then making it sub $100K for starting price. And I tend to think that when you see a company benchmarking against pretty much some of the best cars in their respective categories, that really tells you how serious they are. Chevy's not going to screw this up. So for a quick second, I do want to acknowledge that there are a lot of people out there who are claiming that this isn't going to happen, it's not going to hit the performance targets, and it's going to be a failure. Go to Corvette Forum, go online, go on Facebook. Actually, better yet, don't. I've done it for you. It's a waste of your time. There's so much negativity in the community right now, and I'm trying to cut through that, as well as keep in mind that all of these people are just spraying their opinions around to anybody who will listen, but they don't have any data to back it up. There's not enough confirmed about the car. So in my mind, why on earth would you hope for this thing to fail or make all these excuses and reasons? Everybody's got a cousin that works on the engine production line. I think Chevy understands the opportunity they have before them, and that this isn't really something they can afford to screw up. They're making a statement, making a stand, and they need to prove everybody else wrong. They need to prove the other supercar makers. They need to prove the doubters. They need to prove all the people who don't think this is going to be a fantastic car and really change the supercar game. And I'm behind Chevy on this one. All right, so with that said, I want to get into my second point. And that second point is that supercar makers are watching this very, very closely. See, a lot of supercar makers build their brand, build their prestige on the exclusivity and, in some cases, the performance of their cars. So Porsche, Ferrari, and many others, they thrive on engineered scarcity. They design some amazing car, they build up the press and the buzz for it, they get people in a frothing frenzy wanting the car, but then they only release a limited number. And I get it. Part of buying into these brands traditionally has been you're going to pay a lot of money up front, it's going to be difficult to get a hold of, and there's going to be limited numbers. You're probably never going to be driving around in a 911 GT3 and actually see another GT3 on the road. That's intentional. Ferrari is the same way, and there's a bunch of other brands like that. They want to feel special. They want you to have this limited exclusive vehicle. And I understand that that's part of how they've marketed, and that's part of how they can charge so much money for a car. There is limited supply, there's exceedingly high demand, and that's the way that the market has been played so far for supercars. But for us driving enthusiasts who don't have that kind of money, this is going to provide us a really good option. Now, certainly there is something to be said for the name of a car, the brand, the prestige, the history, all of that stuff. What this is going to do, though, is this is going to push the value proposition of buying any of those named cars. And so I think what we're going to see is these supercar maker brands are going to grasp onto that exclusivity, and that's something that some part of the market is going to want to pay for, but you're no longer going to be getting world-beating performance for a car like that. You're going to be buying your new Ferrari, buying your new Porsche, and able to be beaten on a track by a car that costs half as much. So something to consider, and something I think those supercar makers are going to be watching real closely and figuring out how can we somehow try to elevate our brands to stay above something like a Chevy. Through all that, though, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that landscape changes. All right, so for my third point, and the one that I find most interesting, is that exotic and supercar buyers are taking notice of this car. So let's rewind about 10 years ago and think of the idea of buying a supercar. There are three things that would set that buying experience apart from pretty much any other sports car on the market. The first is that you could be pretty assured that your supercar was going to cost more than what most people could afford. So that sets you apart. The second thing is that you could be pretty assured that your car was going to outhandle just about any other car on the market. And then third, you were going to be pretty sure that your supercar was going to out-accelerate, out-brake, and just generally outperform any sports car in the market. Those were kind of like the three big things you were sure of with buying a supercar. But with the new C8 Z06, only the first of those is going to be true. You're going to be spending more to buy a supercar from an established brand. Now, with that said, here's why I think that a lot of supercar owners and buyers are taking notice. So I'm on the Rennlist forums, which is, if you're not familiar, is a Porsche forum. Pretty big fan of Porsche, the brand, and it's been really interesting to look at the chatter there, as well as I headed over to Ferrari chat. There are a couple big things. First of all, there's a whole slew of threads about the C8 Z06. If you go to most of those forums, you'll find that there's a section for other car manufacturers, and in there, the C8 Z06, there's a whole lot of posts. There's some really interesting things in there. There's a couple camps. There's the people that are the diehards for the brand that forum is for, so Porsche, Ferrari, etc. There's the people who are looking for any particular reason to put down the car. They don't like the looks, they don't like the interior, etc., etc. There's the people who are kind of open-minded. On Ferrari chat, for example, there is a thread about taking the C8 Z06 motor and putting it in older Ferraris to have updated, more reliable tech, and potentially even dropping the transmission in the cars so that you can enjoy an older Ferrari, get the sound you're hoping for, all the better performance, but you also gain the reliability and a much lower cost of maintenance. There are a lot of comparisons between the 458 Italia and the Z06, which I think is pretty interesting. Kind of a natural conclusion, but something that there are a lot of threads about, as well as even on the Porsche forum, there's a lot of people saying, holy cow, look at what you can get for the money versus buying something else. One of the interesting things was I stumbled upon a thread on Rennlist where somebody was talking about the C8 Z06 and is this a better performance deal than a Porsche 911? Now what was interesting is there was some discussion about, oh, I'd rather have the Porsche, or oh, I'd rather have the Corvette. But then they started to talk about the models of Porsche you need to get into in order to find similar performance to what's offered with the Z06. And it wasn't the Carrera, it wasn't the Carrera S. People were starting to talk GT3 and Turbo S to find an apples-to-apples comparison. When you get to those types of cars, you're immediately starting to get to where the price of the Porsche is significantly more than the Corvette. Certainly there are staunch supporters for both brands, as well as I'm sure other marques like McLaren and Lamborghini, but the overall sentiment is that this car offers tremendous value for the money, tremendous performance for the money, and it's something that a lot of people have sounded like they're going to buy one just for giggles to see how it compares to the other cars they have. But there's a growing number of people on these forums who are saying that this is filling a void in a lot of those product lineups by providing a reliable, warranted, and easily serviceable vehicle that offers pretty amazing performance for a relatively affordable price. If performance and driving engagement are what you're after, I'd be hard-pressed to find a car that offers better performance for less money or even the same amount of money. I really think the C8 Z06 is basically a class of one at this point. Alright, now getting back to my original point of this video, putting the world on notice, what does this all mean? It's been interesting to watch the chatter online to see the huge amount of pushback on this car, why it can't happen, why it's going to fail to launch correctly, even questions about things like the performance or reliability. I think the fact that there is so much hard pushback on the car and excuses and, well, this can't happen for this reason, and well, what about this, and that's certainly not a Ferrari. I think that's a pretty good indication that these people, these groups, these brands all feel threatened by the mere existence of this car. And I think this is a good indication that Chevy is on track and already succeeding with their mission of putting the world on notice. If you found this helpful, or you enjoyed it, or you want to see more C8 content, please give me a subscribe and a like. That really helps me out. I'm a small YouTuber, I don't make any money doing this, and I really appreciate the support. So thank you for watching, and until next time, Fred out.